Good morning, everyone. So we have a really exciting morning speaker. We have a really great session. I know in the past, we have always asked to have some airline information, so I think you guys are gonna be really excited on the next session that we have. So if we are ready to go, I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. Steve Ross is here with us. He is the Managing Director of Central and Canada Sales Division for United Airlines. Steve leads a group of about associates that do 19 states, plus the country of Canada for sales for United Airlines. He also has a team that's responsible for United Airlines' entire US and Canada meetings and incentive program and portfolio. During his career with United, Steve has served at a variety of sales, marketing, and brand management positions, including the development and rollout of multiple corporate and agency sales programs, several broad-based customer marketing initiatives, and led a company-wide corporate rebranding campaign. Steve holds both a BA in economics as well as an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh. And we all are tuning in on Sunday, and he will be cheering on the Eagles for the Super Bowl. So with no more waiting, please welcome Steve Ross.
Good morning. Thank you, Cindy, for that very, very kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be with all of you today. This is my first conference, so thank you for the warm welcome that I've received. However, I have to admit I'm a little frustrated this morning. After listening to Herman talk yesterday about ChatGPT, I realized I've spent days working on this presentation. All I had to do was go on the internet, type in, I need a presentation on the airlines for DMOs. I would have had it in 2 minutes, and it probably would have been way better than what you're about to receive. So we're going to go real quickly this morning. We're going to do a little speed dating. We're going to talk about a few subjects here. We're going to talk about what you do when you have lemons. We're going to talk about what we're seeing now in terms of demand curves, a discussion about industry issues that are affecting every single one of us here in the room, a brief glimpse of what the future may look like for all of us and some implications. And lastly, I'm going to hopefully save a couple of moments for some Q&A. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I've been with the airlines for many, many years, United Airlines, 38 years almost. I've had some really good days, good years, bright blue skies, a lot of turbulence as well over that time frame. Especially back in the early 2000s, the industry went through big changes, mergers, acquisitions, consolidation, recession, high oil prices, a lot of bankruptcies. The good thing was the industry came out of that period of time, and over the last 10 years have been very healthy. Our revenues have been good, steadily increasing, which meant that we were making money, which we could reinvest in the product and what we offer to our consumers, our travelers. But the problem was the bottom fell out when COVID hit. So once that happened, what happened? Airplanes sat on the ground. Airports were totally empty. We thought we went from a period in 2020 where we were going to make a lot of money as an industry to just the opposite. All we were flying around initially were nurses and doctors, critical care needs. And we did this for free for quite a while before revenue started to come back. What happened? Airlines were projected to lose billions with a great big B, billions of dollars. And had it not been for the federal bailout, a lot of the airlines that are around today would not be here, or we would look very differently. We'd be much smaller than we are today. But what do you do? This wasn't enough to keep the doors open. We had to figure out, what do you do when you have lemons? You make lemonade. And so in our case, we took our airplanes that normally would have flown passengers, put cargo in the belly. We helped supply a lot of the critical needed things that were initially with COVID, respirators, ventilators, flew these things all over the world, COVID vaccines. The airlines participated and helped getting us out of this mess. But the big thing one of the big advantages of the airline world versus the hoteliers is our assets are mobile. So when demand patterns changed, when no longer was the business traveler going from Chicago to LaGuardia, we were able to take that airplane and fly it to Orlando, or fly it to many of the destinations that you all represent here in this audience, and take advantage of that increase in leisure business. And candidly, this was a big surprise for many of us in the airline industry about how vibrant the leisure side of the business is, and especially the high yield leisure travel. We had no clue. It was a segment we ignored for years. We had no idea how big it is. These are people that doesn't matter what the cost of the ticket is. They'll fly first class, they'll fly business class, they'll go anywhere in the world. It's a bigger market, and it surprised the heck out of us. And we've had to reschedule the airline very differently. We all are rescheduling and doing things differently. You heard Jeff talk about it yesterday in his presentation in the morning about how we're doing things differently. Well, what's going on now? Well, the skies have turned a little bit blue again. The good thing is we've seen demand started to come back. In 2000, we really anticipated we're going to have a huge year globally. But the bottom fell out. We actually were down passenger volume-wise less than 9/11, below 9/11 passenger bookings globally, which is scary as hell for all of us in the business. The good thing, demand started coming back, and especially last year, we all saw what happened with revenge travel. You know, people came back in earnest in 2022, and we saw it in our demand. Not only were passenger volumes up, revenues were up as well, which is a good thing, because we've got big debts to pay off the government as a result. We need the money. If you look around the world, demand is up generally around the world. Really, the global demand, we see a nice steady trend across all markets across the entire world, except for one area, which I'll talk about in a moment. What we're seeing lately is, if you look at this little circle, and it's hard to see these graphs, so don't worry, it's just more the intent of the lines. But what you'll see with a lot of these graphs is the last quarter of this year, late this year, demand spiked. It spiked globally in almost every single market. We saw it in the US. If you look at the big solid purple line for the US, you see really heavy, heavy purple there. Demand is really, really good, and many of you are experiencing this as well. This is true across the world. The lines are all good. They're all positive, going up, except for APAC. APAC still is a problem. However, as Japan opened up recently, the demand from Japan and now coming from Asia as well as going to Asia, except China, is now very much on the rebound. And we're really, really pleased with what we see there. China is a problem, continues to be a problem. Not only intra-China travel between the US and China. It's artificially constrained right now. The Chinese governments, we all know, clamped down on COVID protocols. They've loosened a lot of those. What they haven't loosened up is the supply side. I'll give you an example. United, pre-pandemic, biggest carrier between the US and China, 13 flights a day. We've been operating over the last year with 4 weekly flights. 4 weekly flights. That's all we're allowed by the Chinese government. So we're hopeful as COVID protocol comes along, that they start opening it up a little bit. We think maybe we'll get to go back to daily service again, maybe double daily by the end of the summer. We don't know. So if any of you DMOs that are out there and you're looking at you're anticipating travel coming in from China this year or next year, forget it. It's not going to happen. The market is not going to open up from everything the State Department tells us. Look at places like Australia. Australia's a good example. Again, United's the biggest carrier between Australia and the US. We actually board more point-of-sale Australia than we do point-of-sale US. It's a really good market to look at if you're not doing it already. So what are we seeing in demand in general? You just saw all those charts. Demand is good. Domestic traffic's expected to get back to pre-pandemic levels by late this year, which is good for this industry. It's really being driven still by leisure, and that mix of whatever you want to call it, leisure, mix of business and leisure, which we're all really trying to learn to adapt to. We expect global traffic is going to return to, by pre-pandemic levels by the end of next year. I saw a study this morning from IATA saying the world global industry is back to about 2/3 of pre-pandemic level right now. We anticipate the rest of that coming on in the next year and a half. A lot of that's really dependent on China. If China opens up faster, business travel will come back faster, leisure travel will come back faster, and we'll hit those numbers faster than we thought. And it'll still be a year probably faster than what the original projections were. Global business travel still got a hole to dig out of. Domestically, we are running anywhere between 75 to 80% of pre-pandemic levels for business travel in general. We expect to get back to about 90% by the end of this year because we're seeing business travel start to come back a little bit, but it's still not where we want it to be. And again, China's a real key to this. IATA's predicting, with a good thing, the airlines are going to return to profitability this year, which is a good thing for this industry so we can continue to reinvest. Now, here's a lot of the key things I want to talk about, some of the industry issues that we see. I know Cindy mentioned I was an economics major in college. And this is a real good indicator of what's going on in the health of the industry right now. If you look at GDP over the last 20 years, the airline industry was about 0.5% of GDP. What happened, we saw yesterday, Adam and Jeff talked a little bit about the fact that consumer spending changed during the pandemic. Instead of buying airline tickets, what were people doing? They're buying capital goods, new washer, dryer, fix my deck, put a new roof on the house. They weren't spending on travel. Travel started coming back in 2021, came back in a vengeance last year, and we're projecting by the end of this year we're going to be back to traditional levels with GDP with the airline industry. So again, a good indicator that health has returned to this industry, which is good for all of us, especially those of us that have a pension that they're working towards. We're really encouraged by demand. It was great at the end of the year. We anticipate demand continuing really good throughout the rest of this year, but there are a lot of headwinds. And I know the guys talked a little bit about some of those headwinds yesterday, things like that really do threaten the viability of the industry, despite what we see as a healthy demand side. There are other issues that may offset that to some degree, things like recession. We're watching like hawks what's going on in Washington with the budget ceiling discussions to see if that does set off an artificial recession or not. We don't know. That has severe implications for all of us. Inflation. Inflation is something we've all been dealing with, and in many cases, we've been able as an industry to absorb a lot of the inflationary costs that are going on, but some of it in reality is being passed along to the consumer in the form of higher prices. Now, we've seen pricing come down a little bit lately, but there are enough headwinds out there that I think you're going to see pricing probably continue to go up through the balance of this year. Supply issues. We'll talk about these in a few minutes. That's the supply of pilots, supply of airplanes. Very critical to our business. We'll chat more about that. Staffing. Staffing was a huge issue last year. You saw a lot of meltdowns early in the year with staffing. Airlines overscheduled. Overscheduled because they saw demand out here, and everybody overscheduled to try and take advantage of demand, that revenge travel that was coming back, and they weren't prepared. They didn't have enough staffing in many cases, or the infrastructure to be able to support that. We all got caught in a bad situation in May and June. We learned a lot from that. Not enough, but we learned from that. Labor costs are going up. Pilot costs are going up. There are new pilot contracts that are out there. I'm going to talk about some of them in a moment. Delta just signed a new contract. United, American are going to follow here shortly. Big increases, and there's a reason why we're paying them more, and I'll talk about that. Fuel cost. Fuel is 30% of our expenses. We watch this every single day, what goes on with fuel. And we pay a premium over the barrel of oil when it's refined at. There's a pinch in terms of the refinery capacity to be able to refine fuel for the airline industry. The good thing is it's recently taken a little nosedive down, which is a good thing for our business. Infrastructure, we'll talk about a lot of the issues that are going on there. A lot of geopolitical issues like China we just talked about. The other thing that's affecting our industry and our ability to fly where we want to go is the war in Ukraine. You might say, hey, Steve, why is that bugging the U.S. airlines? Well, we can't fly a lot of our long-haul flying out of Chicago or out of the East Coast to Asia because we have to overfly Russian airspace. We can't fly from San Francisco to Bangalore. We can't fly over Russian airspace. We can't do it economically. So it's really affecting our ability to provide service to these markets, yet foreign flag carriers have no problem. They overfly. They can do this. They can provide that market. So we're working with the State Department on trying to figure out, like, how do you even the playing field here? So this is a slide I stole from an external earnings call that we just had about a month ago with investors. And I used this slide because I didn't have to build it, and it says what I want to talk about, so thank God. I'm going to talk a lot about pilots here in a second because it affects every single one of us sitting here in the audience, and I want to talk about why there's a pilot shortage. And this is really a situation of supply and demand. Demand for pilots is at an all-time high. The supply is at an all-time low of new pilots coming in. Why is that? Well, this is an issue I've been literally talking about since 2017. We knew that this was going to be an issue for several years, and there's some reasons why, which we'll talk about. It used to be an issue, then it became a bigger issue, and now it's a major issue for the industry and the health of the industry. This all started back in about 2009, 2010. The federal government changed the rules on what it takes to be qualified for an airline, commercial airline pilot. They basically doubled the requirements to be able to fly. And that followed a bad accident in Buffalo, New York. There were reasons why it happened. These rules changed. They were good things. I mean, the U.S. industry is by far the safest in the world. And this has helped in that safety. But it really crimped the number of pilots, our ability to be able to get pilots through the pipeline. Because this is multi-years to be able to qualify to get them to go sit in one of our jets. It's a multi-year process. The other thing that happened was COVID exasperated this because some airlines furloughed pilots, and some of those pilots left the industry. They said, I've had enough, I'm gone. In other cases, they retired pilots early, not thinking demand was going to come back as fast as it did. It caught some of the carriers by surprise. So again, little issue, bigger issue, big issue now. Well, there's a critical need for pilots. About 12,000 by the end of this year. We need 12,000 new pilots. The problem is there's only about 6,000 in the pipeline. So you can do the math. We're not going to be flying all those places. All that demand we see out there, we can't service it. It's a global problem. It's not a U.S. problem. It's a global problem. And there are lots of new airlines that are coming up. There are a lot of growing airlines, so the need for pilots is really severe. This really is partly a result of a perfect storm. Where did airlines get their pilots for years? From the military. The problem is the military's not flying so many airplanes anymore. And they got smart. The military got smart. Instead of spending $4, $5, $6 million in training a pilot and have them walk out the door and go to an airline after about 8 years, they start paying really high retention bonuses. So they're not leaving in droves anymore. So, and what else is going on? They're flying drones. And you can't take a desk jockey sitting with a joystick flying a drone and put them in the cockpit of a 787 and expect them to be able to get it up in the air with 250 people and back down again safely. It don't work. So what do we do? What do you do when your supply starts drying up? Well, you go to the next logical place. We went to our farm team, which was the express carriers that we all work with. These are surrogates that operate under our brands and serve smaller communities, many of which are you sitting in here in the audience today. And normally, we would take about domestic industry would take about 2,500 captains a year out of the express carrier ranks and promote them. We've been running the last 3 years at about 5,000 a year, 5,000 captains a year that we pull out of there. We can't backfill fast enough. So what happened as a result? Those airplanes they used to fly went on the ground. We stopped flying to a lot of communities. Many of you have been affected by United, American, Delta, you name it. We've all pulled service from many of the smaller cities that are out there around this country. In some cases, left cities with no service. There are 500 of these airplanes sitting on the ground today that we would love to fly, can't fly them. Not enough pilots to fly those. So, and this is not going to end shortly. This is a couple-year fix. So what is the industry doing about it? We're doing a couple things. Number one, we now have turned to alternate sources of feed besides the express carriers themselves. To go get your commercial license to be able to qualify and get that 1,500 hours, you're probably looking at about $100,000 to $140,000, depending on what program you go through. The problem was, for many years, the airlines didn't pay starting first officers and express carriers very much. You might get lucky, and this was even a year or so ago, you might get lucky and start at $25,000 to $29,000 a year, which was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So what happened? If I know I'm going to spend $100,000, $120,000 on my education, and I'm not going to be able to pay that back very easily for years of like laboring at that to eventually get to the pot of gold with the big airlines, people stopped coming to us. They stopped flying. Didn't want to fly, didn't want to do this. So, I'll back up a second. So, we finally got smart. The industry now actually tripled the wages. You now start about $75,000 to maybe $90,000. So it's a good wage. And then captains all increased their wages at the express carriers. There's actually, you can make a good amount of money now. And the express carriers now, their wages are actually almost on par with the Spirits, the Frontiers, and JetBlues of the world, which means we're all looking for pilots. They used to also pull from here. Now they can't because their wages are actually fairly similar. The big airlines, we pay more, and we have great big airplanes, and that's where people make their money. The bigger the airplane you fly, the more money you make. So people want to work for the big guys in particular. The other thing we're doing is we've established programs of flow-through with our express carriers to be able to, we're guaranteeing people now jobs. If you go to work for one of our express carriers, we'll guarantee you the opportunity to fly for United, Delta, American, et cetera. We're also partnering with aviation schools and universities around the country. And now it's like, go to that school. We'll guarantee you a job. Once you get your ratings, you come out, guarantee a job with Express Carrier. We'll guarantee you a job with United. Again, you pass all your ratings, you have to be able to do this. And it's really and next step is now we're paying, in many cases, tuition reimbursement for people to be able to go to schools, go to these programs, eventually come to workforce. And we at United, we actually went a step further. We started our own flight academy. So we have our own source of pilots now. We just graduated our very first class 2 weeks ago. And the good thing, and what we're trying to do too is we're addressing, at least on the United side, got a problem in the cockpit with DEI. There are very few women, very few people of color flying airplanes for commercial airlines. 50% of these classes will all be women or people of color to help address the social issue as well. So guaranteed a pipeline as well as addressing social issues. There's another perfect storm, I won't belabor this, mechanics. There's a dearth of new people, new blood coming in to become airline mechanics. They're all got gray hair like me. And, but what we've done as well, United started our own programs with the local communities, VOTEC schools, high schools to be able to do apprenticeships now to get people into this. So I'm going to put my sales hat on for 1 minute. Excuse me. So I know you all are looking for data analysts. That's fine. Have at it. However, you have a son, a daughter, a niece, and nephew, somebody that wants to go into aviation. This is a fabulous time to go fly an airplane, repair an airplane. These pay extremely well. Believe me, they pay way more than I'm getting paid. So take that from a trusted source. These are great careers. So please direct people to us. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. It can help maybe get people oriented to the right pipeline. What else is going on? Big industry issues, sick time. Sick time has raised considerably, 20% over the last couple of years. Part of it's due to COVID. People taking care of their sons or daughters themselves being exposed. Can't have them in the airplane if they've been exposed. Also, state laws have changed. We've actually had to hire 10% more pilots just to fly what we planned to fly, just to cover sick time calls, as well as some of the having enough reserve because of some of the infrastructure issues that are out there. 5% more airplanes we have to have just to be able to work through a lot of these issues with crew resources and things. It's a big issue for the industry. It's going to raise cost for all of us as well. Plane deliveries, way behind. We don't have enough planes. A lot of them you're going to see in a second, are sitting where? Sitting on the ground. They're in storage. A lot of them were those little regional jets we talked about, but there are a lot of big jets as well. They're older, inefficient jets. The newer ones that we desperately need that are very fuel efficient, drive our costs down, we can't get from the manufacturers. So again, lots of airplanes sitting on the ground, and there are 10,000 more airplanes that we understand are going to be retired over the next 10 years. The problem is manufacturers can't make them that fast. A lot of these airplanes are sitting on the ground are those ones I talked about, those regional jets that are sitting there. Boeing and Airbus both behind, supply chain issues, some of them self-inflicted. They're getting better, but they're still about a year behind where they should be at this point in time. So that's crimping as well what we can do, and a lot of these are longer range airplanes that would get to a lot of the international destinations that we would like to serve. The last thing, infrastructure. We know it's a mess. We all suffer through that. There are self-inflicted infrastructure issues, both with older equipment in some cases on the FAA side. Some of it's airlines themselves that have grown too fast, that didn't really keep up with investments. What did we see? I'm not going to go through this. We've all had our day in the sun, so I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but we saw what happened at the end of last year. Part of that was weather-related. Part of that truly was self-inflicted in many ways. And this has got to be addressed. The industry has got to address this. Then we had the meltdown with the FAA. A lot of that is old technology. This you can blame partly on the FAA. You can partly blame it on Congress. A lot of the money that was appropriated to do a lot of the funding of new generation air traffic control, the NOTAM system, which is notice to air mission, which as a pilot you need to know like what's going on at the airport I'm flying into. It's a terrible old antiquated system. It's 50 years old. You should be able to do it on your iPad and get this information. It doesn't exist because the funding was all kicked down the road by Congress. So if there's anything that may be going on good right now is there's a lot of finger pointing between Washington, the airlines. We know Southwest is going to testify on Thursday in front of Congress because of their meltdown. The good thing is we think this may have actually shown the light on the fact that infrastructure has to get funded in this country. And we think there's a reauthorization bill, the FAA reauthorization bill is coming up at the end of September. We're hopeful that Congress will pass this as is. So I encourage you, call your congressman, your congresswoman, encourage them to vote that money through and not use that money to offset surpluses. It's be good for every single person flying around this country. So watch the space. What are you going to see over the next year? Demand's going to continue to outpace supply. You're going to see operating costs climb. As a result, probably ticket prices will to some degree. You're going to see periods of overscheduling because we're all mesmerized right now by the big demand out there and want to be able to try and capture that. This is going to create some issues with continued operational issues, and you're starting to see a schism between the airlines that plan well and have the right infrastructure and those that don't. And they're not, so you're going to see that schism, I think, even widen this year. This is me talking. Geopolitical tensions are going to continue. We need that congressional money, and we're going to return to profitability. So I'm going to skip just real quickly, take a look real fast at the future. What does it look like? The future's not that far away, folks. It's around the corner, but it's actually very bright. What is this? If you haven't heard the term eVTOL, it's electric, vertical, takeoff and landing aircraft. These are little air taxis. These are the Ubers. These are the Ubers of the air mobility world. These are coming. The prototypes are in testing right now. These are 4 to 6 passenger little aircraft. They can go up to about 100 miles in radius. It's going to change the dynamics of getting to and from an airport, whether it's a major airport or whether it's out to an island, someplace that doesn't have an airstrip. You land these things on a helipad. This is coming. This is out there. It's coming. It's going to change a lot of what's going on in the industry. This is United. We've bought a couple hundred of these. This is just a rendering. We've already announced our first market. It's Manhattan to Newark Airport. Instead of taking the train or the tunnel or a bridge to Newark, 10-minute flight into Manhattan. It's going to change all of the world for all of us. The other thing that's coming, electric airplanes. They are going to be a thing that are coming as well. You're going to see these in market between 2006 and 2008. The beauty of these things, carbon neutral. They can take off and land on very short runways. You don't need a long runway like you do for a regional jet. So it's going to open up a lot of markets that are out there, and you don't need to have 1,500 hours to fly these things either. There are different rules to fly these. Lots of alternative fuels that are coming. Hydrogen-fueled airplanes are coming. The prototypes are being tested right now. There's a turboprop that's using hydrogen, and this is truly a look at the future. I'm not kidding. We think this is going to happen. United, American, JAL, and the U.S. Defense Department have all made a big investment in building supersonic aircraft. They're actually building the plant right now in South Carolina that's going to produce these things. So those of you in New York, New York and Co., somebody can be in London, fly to New York for lunch, and fly back home. It changed a lot of the dynamics. Anyway, I am I'm actually out of time. So don't have any Q&A right now, but I will come back. I'm going to be on a panel discussion here in a second. And then if we have some time, I'll be able to answer some questions then. Thank you, guys.